DHEA, let's talk about how to optimize it naturally. It's considered the fountain of youth for a lot of different reasons, but it's also been shown in men, the higher plasma levels of DHEAS, to have less cardiovascular disease and also your body's ability to transform food into energy so you're not fatigued and also burn off excess body fat, kind of like testosterone. And they've also shown that it has anti-inflammatory properties there. And it should be pointed out, as I mentioned here, that chronic inflammation is known to play a crucial role in development of killer diseases of aging, like heart disease, Alzheimer's, and certain types of cancer. Now, we'll talk about supplementation, but in Australia, it's a prescription medication. In the United States, you can buy it at your health food store. However, if you've got inflammation and oxidative stress, and a lot of people do, you're going to be converting a lot of that DHEA into estrogen, so it will backfire on you. So we'll talk about how to optimize it naturally because you mightn't even need DHEA. So a couple of things here. We can see when it's created by looking at when it's highest in the body. So in the morning, it's very high. And in the afternoon, towards 6 o'clock, it's very low. So clearly, we're going to make a lot of it in sleep. And another remarkable thing about DHEA is it's got a bank. Your body puts a sulfur group onto it and makes it water soluble, and it's just in the blood. And as you need it, you can tap into that bank and use it. So if you're sleeping really good, you're going to have a lot of DHEA. Now, another important thing to understand about DHEA is that it helps you perform under pressure. So as I learned from Kelly McGonigal in 2015, how to be good at stress, when you've got higher levels of cortisol, it's been associated with worse outcomes. And I'll talk about why that's the case in a couple of slides from here. And you've also got impaired immune function and depression. But in contrast, high levels of DHEA, the neural steroid, have been linked to reduced risk of anxiety, depression, heart disease, neurodegeneration, and other diseases we typically think of as stress-related. So you got eustress, which is positive, good stress. Then you've got distress, which is cortisol. And what I also learned from Kelly is that when you've got optimal levels of DHEA, it's what they call the growth index for stress response, meaning that more DHEA relative to cortisol is associated with thriving during and after stressful experiences. So if we can optimize this hormone, we're a long step in the right direction. And just to drive that point home, here's Kelly speaking about it. Check this out.
Well, they were less stressed out, less anxious, more confident. But the most fascinating finding to me was how their physical stress response changed. Now, in a typical stress response, your heart rate goes up and your blood vessels constrict like this. And this is one of the reasons that chronic stress is sometimes associated with cardiovascular disease. It's not really healthy to be in this state all the time. But in the study, when participants viewed their stress response as helpful, their blood vessels stayed relaxed like this. Their heart was still pounding, but this is a much healthier cardiovascular profile. It actually looks a lot like what happens in moments of joy and courage.
What would that mean to you? When you're under pressure, speaking on stage or giving that presentation or that difficult conversation, you stay calm under pressure. I think that's a really important thing to understand how to do. So that leads me to this here. So there's going to be 4 videos in this. Now, if you're a younger dude and you're doing pretty well, you probably only need this video right here. However, if you're older like me, and I'm 53 in a couple of months, you're probably going to need to watch all of these to fully optimize it. And the only unfortunate thing about that, and you won't want to hear this, is it takes time. So I've got things identified as light clamps, which you can fix now. And that's what this video is all about. And the heavy clamps, they take time. And in those videos, we'll talk about how much time. And I'll also give you some key insights to some of them, like food sensitivities here today and how that impacts your sleep. Because as we now know, my friends, sleep is when we're going to make a lot of the neural steroid DHEA. So let's talk about it. So basically, as Kelly said there, you know, you've got 2 kinds of stress. You've got distress, principal hormone, cortisol. Too much cortisol, not good. Then you've got your heart's got erratic heart rates, arrhythmias. Then you've got decreased cortical activity, so you can't think, and you're trying to speak on stage. You've got ums and ahs, and you feel like an idiot. And then The fear and anxiety center's got the juice, and it physically grows larger in the presence of cortisol. But on the other side over here, you got better blood pressure, good heart rhythm. You got increased cortical activity. So when you're doing your speech, you can articulate yourself. You don't have ums and ahs, and you got the appropriate amount of amygdaloid activity. So that's what we want to think about. You've got an elevated heart rate, and you're still pumping out the good stuff, and your brain is online. So let's continue with our journey on this today. So we got 2 stress responses, and this is key to understand, and this will be very apparent halfway through this presentation. So you got the fast path. So the old amygdala sends an impulse down the spine to your adrenals, and it releases adrenaline and norepinephrine, right? And then the slow path over here, which takes about 3 minutes to dump a whole bunch of cortisol into the system, is the ACTH pathway, which releases cortisol and also things like aldosterone through the kidney. So it's a 1-2 punch. Now, the only unfortunate thing about cortisol is that you can get into a positive feedback loop. So you're always producing low amounts of cortisol all day long, and you're going to be feeling like shit. It's going to deplete your energy. You're going to feel emotional. You're going to get triggered easily because, as you can see here, you've got an altered stress response. The amygdala, fear and anxiety, it actually physically increases. You're releasing cortisol all the time. The hippocampus, which is learning and memory, working memory, divergent, convergent thinking, is all taken down. And this negative feedback loop is kind of switched off. So you're going to experience a lot of emotional events, and everything will trigger us emotionally. But the good news is scientists have now shown us, and this will be in video 4, how to physically reduce the size of the amygdala, the grey matter in the amygdala, and at the same time, the hippocampus, as you can see here, increase its size, and also the temporal parietal junction, which is really important for perspective taking, empathy, and compassion. So let's talk about how we can start to optimize DHEA. So what's important to understand is that DHEA and cortisol have the same protein hormone precursor called ACTH, and it's released in a pulsatile manner every 24 hours, about 40 pulses per day of ACTH to either make cortisol, distress, feel like shit, or DHEA, eustress, feel good. So both DHEA and cortisol by ACTH, the same protein hormone precursor. Now, sleep, as I've mentioned there's a lot of things that can interrupt your sleep, and I'll talk about one, which is food sensitivity. So the science is very clear on this. If you've got food sensitivities, whether that's a DNA set in stone or an inappropriate immune response to foods, it's going to give you sleep disorders. So you're not going to sleep very deeply. And that's a big problem for DHEA because, as we now know, you got your ACTH, and it's either going to make DHEA or it's going to make cortisol. And as we can now appreciate, DHEA is high in the morning and it's low in the afternoon. So we're going to make a lot of DHEA while we sleep. So we have to be sleeping pretty efficiently. Now, on video 3, we'll talk about these food sensitivities and how to identify them and test for them. But as you can see here, this is from one of the people that I'm helping. And as you can see here, dairy, he's pretty sensitive to dairy, almonds, barley, oats. And this gentleman has been gluten and grain free for over 6 months, and he's still testing positive to gliadin and gluten and wheat antibodies, even though he's abstained from gluten, gliadin, and grains for 6 months. So this immune response, because he's been eating the wrong foods for a very long time, has tapped out his sleep, his testosterone, and his DHEA. And just one more slide on that, which is really surprising to me, and I see this sometimes with the people that I help. He's pretty sensitive to beef, egg whites, egg yolks, and the rest of this he's okay with. He's even a little bit sensitive to ginger, all of this stuff here, peaches. So you can see that I'll talk about this in video 3. If you've got this going on while you're trying to sleep, you're making cortisol. instead of DHEA. So you're always going to be waking up with low DHEA, and we don't want that. So we have to solve that one. So if you're an older dude like me, video 3 is going to be key. If you're a younger dude and you don't have these issues, this very first video should be able to fully optimize you. Now let's talk about how to get good sleep. So what we have to think about is that we've got this thing called the circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm is trained up and solidified, number one, by sleep. And you want to go to sleep at the same time, say 9 o'clock, and wake up at the same time, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's setting your circadian rhythm in stone. And the next step is to get sunlight within the first hour of waking. Now, the scientists have shown this pretty conclusively now. And there's 3 big things that I want to talk about there when we don't get light in the morning. So the first one is the impact on our emotions. You've got fluctuations in mood, irritability, anxiety, loss of empathy, frustration. You're impulsive, negative salience, some more negative thoughts than you like. Then you're relying on stimulants to keep you going throughout the day there. And then your cognition takes, so your moneymaker comes down. You can't problem solve. So your ability to do memory consolidation, your attention, your concentration, your communications, decision-making, creativity and productivity, also motor performance at the gym and social connectivity. So you get social anxiety. And then long-term health consequences like micro-sleeps, daytime sleepiness, cardiovascular, altered stress response. So your cortisol is always pumping. And you've got lowered immunity, infection, cancer, metabolic abnormalities, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, depression, and psychosis. So as you can see there, we need to think about getting a healthy dose of sun in the morning. And I'll talk about how much in a moment. But let's check this one out. So if you're sleeping really well, you don't have these food sensitivities, you're going to be waking up with a lot of DHEA. So that is step number 1. But step number 2 is to get a healthy dose of sun within the first hour of waking. Because when you get a healthy dose of the sun, 2 things happen. It triggers cortisol to rise up to healthy levels. So cortisol, as you can see here, in the middle, this is healthy levels of cortisol. And this is low fatigue cortisol. And this is anxiety levels of cortisol in the morning there. So how do you feel? Are you waking up and you're feeling pretty energized? Well, you got healthy cortisol. Are you waking up and feeling a bit anxious? Well, your cortisol is a bit too high. And you're waking up feeling fatigued and your cortisol is dysregulated pretty severely there. So if you get your sunlight within the first hour of waking, it's going to trigger cortisol to come up to healthy levels. Now, I've got a couple of videos here from Huberman just speaking to how important it is to time the sun to time and trigger cortisol to come up to healthy levels. Check this out.
So the first tool is to make sure that your highest levels of cortisol are first thing in the morning when you wake up. One way or another, every 24 hours, you will get an increase in cortisol. That is non-negotiable. That is written into your genome. That increase in cortisol is there to wake you up and to make you alert. It's to stimulate movement from being asleep, presumably horizontal, to getting up and starting to move about your day. Because in the early part of the day, you have the opportunity to time that cortisol release to the early part of the day, which will improve. This has been backed by peer-reviewed studies. It will improve your focus, it will improve your energy levels, and it will improve your learning throughout the day. It will also prevent a late shift in cortisol increase.
So as you can see there, it's pretty important to get that healthy dose of sun within the first hour of waking. It'll prevent a late shift, which is going to impact your sleep. And it's also going to give you a nice rise in energy. And then because you got a lot of DHEA, because you slept really well, it's the neural steroids, going to give you a lot of fat loss. It's going to give you a lot of energy, as I mentioned in the beginning of this. Now, just to reiterate how important it is, Huberman, just one more video all about getting a healthy dose of sun. Check this out.
One can use to ensure that your entrainment, your circadian entrainment, is precise. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that your circadian entrainment be precise. Why? Because disruptions in circadian entrainment cause huge health problems. They increase cancer risk. They increase obesity. They increase mental health issues. They decrease wound healing. They decrease physical and mental performance. They disrupt hormones. You want your cells to be linked to the circadian cycle that's outside you. And the circadian cycle outside you mainly consists of when there's sunlight and when there is not. And that's why the simple protocols to fall out of this whole discussion about circadian entrainment are the following. View 10 to 30 minutes of bright light, ideally sunlight, within an hour of waking, assuming that you're waking early in the day. Especially you wake up early in the day, get outside, see sunlight. Do that again in the afternoon or around evening, 10 to 30 minutes, depending on how bright it is outside.
So as you can see there, 10 to 30 minutes, depending if it's sunny or overcast. Obviously overcast, you want to stay out there a bit longer. And I'll give you another tool towards the end if you don't have access to sun, especially if it's wintertime. And I'll talk about that as we progress. So, more information on DHEA just to really rev up the engine to make you hungry to want to optimize this one here. So when you've got optimal DHEA, you have significant increases in the positive effect scales of caring and vigor. Everyone wants vigor. And also, and importantly, significant decreases in the negative effect scales of guilt, hostility, burnout, anxiety, and stress. DHEA is significantly and positively related to the effective state warm-heartedness, whereas cortisol significantly and positive related back up here to stress. So we certainly don't want that. Another research paper, superior military performance. Another one, problem-solving and academic performance. So we've got to really make sure that we set our circadian rhythm by the sun and getting sleep. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. You're setting that son of a bitch in stone. And if we take care of these food sensitivities, which I'll talk about in video number 3, we're a long step in the right direction. Now here is going to show you why it's really important also to get sun within the first hour of waking. So when you get sun or light therapy here, it goes through the retina into the brain, triggers the release of thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, thyroid hormone will increase muscle protein synthesis, fat loss, brain function, liver detox, testosterone production, increase your metabolism, give you a lot of energy. And it makes perfect evolutionary sense because in the winter, we got up at probably 8 o'clock and the sun was just coming up and it went down at about 4. So we weren't producing a lot of thyroid hormone. And evolutionary scientists say that it was to lower our metabolism so we'd last the long cold winter when food was scarce. However, come summer, it's up at 5:30 and it's down about 7:30. We're producing a boatload of thyroid hormone. So it's like a twofer. It's going to optimize cortisol and DHEA, set your circadian rhythm, and it's going to give you a lot of energy. Now, this light therapy there, that's something that you can put in front of your computer and it just blares up at you and you need about 20 to 30 minutes and it does basically the same thing. So it's going to trigger that whole cascade, set cortisol, and they've shown this in clinical trials, and it's also going to trigger the release of thyroid hormone. So that's step number 1, setting the circadian rhythm. So we've covered that one. So that's tool number 1. Tool number 2 is to get rid of these toxic chemicals out of your body. Now, I've spoken about this a multitude of times. However, it is really important to understand that these chemicals disrupt your whole body. They are endocrine disrupting. So DHEA is a hormone. It will disrupt that too. So it's estrogenic, it's anti-androgenic, so testosterone and DHEA will tank and it will disrupt your thyroid. So even if you're getting the sun and you're trying to sleep, if these chemicals in your body, they're not helpful at all. And they're very toxic too. We're talking about cytotoxicity, that's your cells, DNA, reproductive toxicity, and neurotoxicity. Now, one special mention goes to the food supply. Check this out. There is a type of mold that you see here, and it's classified as ZEA, ZEN, and ZELs. And guess where it's found? Let me just bring that to front. Check this out. So they're in oats, peanuts, they're in the water supply, all of these things, rice, barley, soy, all that, maize. And if they give it to the animals that we're eating, we eat the animals and we get a dose of these nasty chemicals and it causes system toxicity. Okay? And that's why you've probably heard people talking about grass-fed is the best. So that makes perfect sense because you're not going to get a dose of this toxic stuff. Now, just to really emphasize this, my good friend, Dr. J, he wrote a book called Estrogeneration, and he talked about it in there, and it's a powerful estrogen-like compound. And just to show you here, this is one of the tests we got back from one of the people that we help. And here it is, ZEA right there, over 3 times the levels that he should have it at. And ZEA, its effects, has strong affinity to estrogen receptors. Not good. So he's got 3 times as much. And we'll talk about how to detox that in video number 2. So like even if you're doing everything right, you're getting the sun, you're trying to sleep right, but if you got that and you're trying to detox it, you're never going to be optimal. So I'm trying to give you everything I can to make sure you can do this naturally. Boost your testosterone and DHEA. So there's another big problem. Our water supply is polluted here in Australia and also in America. This is one of the first times I spoke to my friend Dr. J over 4 years ago and listened to what he said about atrazine. It's in our water supply. Check this one out. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, atrazine is got to be up there, depending if it's legal, right? And in Europe, it's totally illegal. 0 is allowed in the drinking water. In America, I mean, they allow 3,000 nanograms per liter in our drinking water.
What does that actually mean in the body?
Yeah, exactly. So our natural estrogen is about 20 for men, wow. Yeah. 20 nanograms per liter. And again, like nanograms. Contrast. Yeah, and nanograms, they didn't really have great technology 50 years ago, and they were barely measuring that, and they didn't think it was that big of a deal. But I mean, women are also about 20. Which most people don't realize. They range between about 20 and 200, depending on the time of the month. But it's not like men are at 20 and women are at like 5,000, right? Or 20,000 or, anything crazy. It's actually similar enough if you mess up these levels. Men and women get affected. But atrazine, 3,000 nanograms per liter, same units in the drinking water. And what's really crazy about that, if you have a frog, if you put a male frog in 300 nanograms per liter of drinking water. And again, just put 300 of atrazine in there, excuse me. Yeah. That male frog turns into a female. And
wow.
And we're drinking 3,000,
3,000.
So clearly you have to filter your drinking water. I mean, it just has to be done with.
Think about that. Like for a dude, you need to get your estrogen between 20 and 80, like depending on how high your testosterone is. You've got to have a ratio of estrogen to testosterone. And there's 3,000 in a glass of water, and it's the same units of measure. It's going to shut you down hard, and it's very toxic to us as well. And again, you've got this ZEA in the food supply too. So a lot of people are eating this, and we've tested people, and this legend here, poor dude, he's got a detox over about 6 months to get rid of this. And it's 3 times over the levels that he's got. And as he's detoxing, it's shutting down his testosterone and causing a bit of inflammation. So we've also got to have inflammation strategies while we're doing this detox. And we'll talk about that in video number 2, my friends. So as you can see here, this ZEN crap that's in the grains and whatnot, digestive issues, reproductive issues, immune issues, and metabolic issues and weight gain. And of course, it's going to increase your cortisol. So these chemicals are a pretty big problem. And the chemicals are in foods, right? Cereals, they're in all boxed foods. They're absolutely everywhere. And they're packed full of these things called AGEs, advanced glycation end products. So we'll talk about AGEs in a little moment, but the way you want to think about this, and if you want to know how to detox this, I've got a PDF that you can download, and I show you how to detox these chemicals. So they're in your personal care products, they're in petrochemical clothes, so synthetic clothes, and they've shown this in published research now. They've actually put these on people, and they've done urine tests as they've been wearing them, and they've been extruding these petrochemicals. They've shown this now. They're in your fry pans, they're in fast food, boxed food, condiments. It's in the air, and they're in a lot of F and C grade foods. So you're getting a big daily load of these estrogen-like chemicals, and they're toxic. Inflammation, pushing up cortisol, screwing up your sleep, destroying your gut. So the whole point is once you find out where they are and eliminate them, you're still going to get a little bit from the air pollution. There's still going to be a tiny amount, even in the organic ones. The daily load is so minimal, it's no problem. You can detox that, no harm, no foul. So let's talk about AGEs because they're pretty deleterious. And how are they even created? I've done another video about this. It should be linked below. How to walk back biological aging. So these advanced glycation end products, AGEs. And when scientists say something is causative, that's a pretty big deal. These AGEs have been linked with Alzheimer's, heart disease, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and wrinkles, and loss of skin elasticity and infertility. So when you've got these AGEs coursing through your body, you can see here you're going to have your droopy eyes because you've got wrinkles and loss of skin elasticity. You got crow's feet there, the dark circles, discoloration of your skin. These lines are more prominent, and these jowls start to sag down because you've lost skin elasticity. And I'll talk about where they are in a moment, but to understand how they're triggered, actually, I'll show you right now where they are because it'll make more sense if I show you. So basically, if you've got dysglycemia, your body makes advanced glycation end products, AGEs, and also ALEs for that matter. And as you can see here, there's ample evidence that AGEs play an important role in skin aging. So you're moving towards accelerated skin aging. And they're in the food supply. And also when you've got ferritin overload, iron overload, it also causes these AGEs to form. And we'll talk about how to correct for that. So let's talk about how to correct dysglycemia, which is elevations in blood glucose. So this is my friend, Dr. J, just speaking to this with a group of the people that we're helping, talking about blood glucose. So pay careful attention to this.
If sugar stays in your body a long time, it's called advanced glycation end products, right? AGE. Glycation, it's basically glucose, right? It's sugar.
Glucose. Yeah.
And it sticks to your proteins like hemoglobin A1C, and it sticks to all kinds of stuff all over your body. It makes your cells all screwed up, and the proteins sticking out of your cells get all screwed up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard to measure. So the nice thing about oxidized LDL, it's easy to measure in a blood test. The problem with age, it's hard to measure because it's all stuck to everything inside your body. It's not just sitting around in your blood. Right? Yeah, keep that blood sugar below 85, you'll be fine.
So that's what we have to really understand is just to keep that blood sugar below that thick level. And the mainstream doctors say that 100 is okay, when it's really not, is it?
No, it's insane. It's completely insane. What they do in the medical system with sugar is they wait until you get full-blown diabetes before they like to complain about it, because that's when they can start selling drugs. It always goes back to the drug sales and how they're trying to manipulate things for that. But you don't want to wait until you get diabetes to pay attention to your blood sugar. You want to be optimized, right? That's the whole goal in all of this.
Basically, what we're talking about here is when you've got dysglycemia, your blood sugar is too high too often, your body will start to have a lot of oxidative stress inflammation and start to produce these AGEs, and you've got accelerated skin aging, and it's just, you feel like shit. And this study that you see here on screen, 22-year-old non-diabetic men, right, 2,000 of them, they followed them for 24 years, and they found that if your fasting blood glucose is above 85, and that's 4.7 in Australia and Europe there, significantly high mortality rate from cardiovascular disease. And as you can see here, another piece of evidence. I found this from Dr. James Antonio in The Blood Sugar Fix. It's a great book. I've got a link below. You can pick it up to fix your dysglycemia. And this one was adapted from O'Keefe et al. In 2008. So when they test your response to glucose, it's called a 2-hour postprandial glucose test. So after 2 hours, if your blood sugar comes to 87 and below, that's 4.7 in European and Australia, you got a coronary regression in the plaque in your arteries, which is cool. That's really, really helpful. But when it comes above that, remember the mainstream medicine says 100 is okay. You're moving in the wrong direction. You're increasing the plaque in your arteries. So glucose induces oxidative stress, and they've shown this in multiple studies now. So when your glucose is too high, you release a lot of inflammation. So inflammation goes up, cortisol goes up, DHEA comes down. and you don't sleep very well, because when you're trying to sleep, your blood sugar's a bit too high and you've got inflammation. When you've got inflammation, you can't make DHEA. So while pre-diabetes may sound insidious, the elevations in blood glucose cause continual elevations in inflammatory markers. So we really need to fix that dysglycemia, the elevations in blood glucose there. So these AGEs, when you've got these AGEs, whether that's dysglycemia or eating products, food products that got a lot of AGEs in them, it triggers the activation of several inflammatory signaling pathways. So as inflammation goes up, cortisol goes up, and your DHEA comes down. Because remember, ACTH will either go to DHEA, or cortisol. Where do you want it to go? Well, we certainly don't want it to be going to cortisol all the time. So we've got to fix that dysglycemia. So think about it like this. If you've got a lifetime load of high AGEs and dysglycemia, and it's in the food supply here, you've got a massive increase in cellular aging. You're going to look older faster. You can't drop the body fat. Your DHEA, your testosterone will be down. You'll feel like shit. But if you're choosing the right foods and you've got control of your blood sugar, you're a long step in the right direction. Now, the final thing that we'll talk about here is gut health. And gut health is absolutely huge. And guess what? These glycosylated end products, AGEs, they cause a leaky gut. And also, as I learned from Dr. Daddis, is that every time your blood sugar goes too high or too low, it causes a stress response that suppresses secretory IgA in the IgA cells and promotes inflammation and a leaky gut. And when you've got a leaky gut because you've got dysglycemia, look at what happens. So your gut has a brain. It's called the enteric nervous system. It's got lots of brain cells, neurons in there, and it talks to all of these organ systems. So up to the brain here, stress, anxiety, depression, IBS, schizophrenia, cognitive decline, autism, brain fog, shit like that. Your hormones are disrupted, cardiovascular disease, lung issues, asthma, sinus, rhinitis, liver, which is huge for detox. If you want to detox the molds and the ZEA, from the foods that we're eating, we've got to have a healthy liver. And to have estrogen at healthy levels, we've got to have a healthy liver. And the pancreas, so we've got type 1, type 2, diabetes and insulin resistance, the bones demineralize, osteoporosis, muscles. So you're lifting your weights at the gym, but you can't pack on the muscle. Well, you could have a sick gut. However, if you leave it too long, sarcopenia sets in, you get very frail and you walk around with those bloody walkers. Who wants that? And then, of course, you've got skin issues, wrinkles and advanced skin aging, alopecia, male pattern baldness, acne, cirrhosis, atopic dermatitis, the gonads, the testes in men and the ovaries in ladies, kidney issues, and gut and bladder issues. So let's talk about how to start protecting the gut. Phase 1 is to start protecting the gut. Video 3, I'll also talk about the other 2 phases to protect your gut. So everything that, a lot of the foods that we're eating, the emotional stress that we're experiencing, the hormonal imbalances, the dysglycemia, that's what's driving all of these issues up here. So this is why it can take a bit of time to walk this back, but it is so worth it, because when you've got a healthy gut, it makes everything easier. So why handicap yourself by having a sick gut? So the first thing we have to do is protect our gut. So again, I'll drive more into this in video 3, but of course the diet's going to play into that, food sensitivities, which I've already spoken about. So medications, antibiotics, well, of course, antacids, antibiotics. And if you're on anti-inflammatory medications like corticosteroids, they inhibit repair and healing in the gut, but also muscle growth slows down and joint health slows down. So I've got to really pay attention to a healthy gut. And then all of these infections, and we've tested lots and lots of people, and they do have these parasites and a bacterial overgrowth. And I'll speak more about it in video 3. Then cortisol, like when it's up, it's suppressing repair of the gut. So we've got to really take a handle on that. And CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone there, that actually destroys the gut. And to really drive this point home, Dr. Rhonda Patrick just speaking to that. Check this out.
cortical releasing hormone, which is a stress hormone. Through the vagal nerve. When you release it, goes into the gut. It activates immune cells, which then activate other proteins in the gut that chew up. They're called proteases. They chew up the gut barrier, and then you start to release more inflammatory cells, which then get in contact with bacteria, more inflammation, and then it goes back. It's like this feedback loop.
So that stress, emotional eating, all of those things can really exacerbate those issues. Then hormonal imbalances like thyroid is super important for the gut, progesterone, estrogen, and also testosterone. Now, this is my friend, Dr. J, just speaking to that. So listen to this.
Discs in the back. It goes back to testosterone. You probably has some low back stuff, but this plus in the sheet, almost everybody complains of low back pain and things.
Yep.
But it's all about testosterone to keep that at bay, to protect against future problems there. Testosterone.
How does testosterone do that?
It shuts off interleukins. And interleukins, kind of like CRP, it's a form of inflammation.
Right. Okay.
And there's 24 of them. There's IL-1, there's IL-2, there's IL-3, all the way to 24. And some of them are in your knees, and some are in your elbows, and some are in your discs in your back, and some are in your brain.
Yeah.
And so this particular one, IL-1 alpha, it's called interleukin 1 alpha. It's in your discs in your low back.
Yep.
And it can get out of hand and just cause specific low back disc degeneration and disc pain, and bulging discs and all this kind of stuff if you have inflammation there all the time, and testosterone shuts it off.
So I guess testosterone would be a very powerful lever to pull down on to get rid of inflammation when it's up at the right level.
Exactly. Yeah. In general, especially in the low back. Yeah. That's why the drug companies hate it, right? Because if you have nice high testosterone, it's going to heal a lot of chronic issues that they're prescribing drugs for, like arthritis and gut issues, like IBS. They have all these drugs for irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah.
It's just on and on.
Testosterone is like a magic. And, Dr. J went on to say that you've got these interleukins for the gut, and it's shutting that down. So you can see how that plays into it. And then brain trauma, neurodegeneration, glycosylated end products, which is simply AGEs, which is blood sugar dysregulation, intestinal inflammation. And a lot of people have undiagnosed autoimmune disease. We see this quite frequently. Now, when I went through and did my certificate in nutrition, I also took an extra course with Dr. Daddis. So you've heard me speaking about him here today. And that should be linked below if you want to go take that gut health course. I think it's about $300 and it's phenomenal. And this is what he said to do. We have to stop destroying the gut. And dysglycemia is a big problem because when your blood sugar is too high and it's too low, it's up and down all over the place. That causes a stress response, right? Cortisol, catecholamines that suppress secretory IgA that promotes inflammation and a leaky gut. So how do you know? How do you feel? Is your energy up? Is it down? Do you have fatigue? Do you have anxiety? All of those issues, you're pretty certain that you've got some kind of dysfunction there. Now, another big problem is what's called emulsifiers, because they wash away the protective lining of your gut, and they're absolutely everywhere. Here's Huberman just speaking to that. Check this out.
Foods. You're bringing those emulsifiers into your gut, and those emulsifiers strip away the mucosal lining of the gut, and they actually cause the neurons that innervate the gut, that extend those little processes we call axons into the gut, to retract deeper into the gut. And as a consequence, you're ingesting a bunch of food, and the signals like CCK never get deployed. The signals that actually shut down hunger are never actually triggered. And so as a consequence, you want to eat far more of these highly processed foods. In addition, if you then go from eating a highly processed food to non-highly processed foods, you're not able to measure the amounts of amino acids, sugars, and fatty acids in those foods as accurately. You've actually done structural damage at a micro level, but structural level damage, to the mucosal lining of the gut. Now, this can all be repaired if you stay away from highly processed foods for some period of time, but the negative effects of these emulsifiers are quite real. So,
pretty big problem when you say. So that's why you can eat a big bag of chips and you never feel full, because number one, you're destroying the gut. Number two, there's not enough essential amino acids and fatty acids to even say to your gut, I've had enough to eat. So you just keep on overeating and your gut's being destroyed from the highly processed foods. So these emulsifiers act like detergents and they wash away the protective lining of your gut. And this again is Dr. Daddis. Now, he's a really smart individual. Like, he's got a PhD, DHSC, DCMS, MMS, MMSC, FACN, so highly, highly educated. And when I went through and did his course, this is one of the things that he said. Listen carefully.
So inflammation in the gut activates gut immune cells. Those gut immune cells send messenger proteins to cells in the brain called neuroglia. Those neuroglia get activated, and then the brain gets inflamed. And when the brain gets inflamed, nerve conduction, synapses slow down. Inflammation in the brain slows down synapses, and patients just can't think, they can't focus, they can't get their thought process going on. So those are the things that happen with it. So basically, some people that have immune reactions to gluten, they get severe brain inflammation when they eat it. They can even have their blood-brain barrier, gut barrier breakdown. They can set up the stage for neurological autoimmunity. They can decrease blood flow to their brain. As their brain gets inflamed, their messenger synaptic pathways become slower, and they just don't function well. And they walk in the healthcare system and they get diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder or chronic anxiety disorder.
Basically misdiagnosed. As you can see there, the gut, super important. And these emulsifiers, they're absolutely everywhere. So then you prescribe these drugs. Like, I was on them. I was on anti-anxiety drugs. I was on beta blockers, asthma drugs. I was on a whole bunch of these drugs, and I'm off them now, off all of them. I've got great blood pressure. So these big pharma drugs, like, they're helpful for some people, but, my whole goal is to get off them and not have to worry about them. That's what I've done. I've done this for years and years and years now. The problem number one is that they lower testosterone and DHEA because they're petroleum based, right? 99% of pharmaceuticals are petrochemicals which mimic estrogens. When estrogen's too high, down comes DHEA, down comes testosterone. So that's problem number one. And this is my friend, Dr. Ken Berry, speaking to that.
All those things are symptoms of low testosterone, and there's a long list of prescription medications that you might be taking from your doctor, your doctor that you trust, that could actually be plummeting your testosterone levels. I've got a YouTube video about medication.
So that's a big problem. So the second problem is that these pharmaceuticals, to help absorb them, they use emulsifiers. And one of them is like polysorbate 80, there's carbomoxin there. You've got all of these different kinds of emulsifiers. Listen to Dr. J. Listen carefully.
It's not thriving. It's definitely suboptimal. It's frustrating, honestly. I mean, especially on the topic of testosterone, because if your testosterone goes down, just your health in general goes down. So that opens the door to a bunch of prescription drugs.
Yeah.
And so the pharma companies are very excited about keeping your testosterone down from a financial perspective.
Exactly.
As a business model, it's a good idea for them.
So Dr. J and Dr. Ken Berry, that's keeping your DHEA and your testosterone down. And they're using emulsifiers, which we now can see, all the ones that they're using, like polysorbate 8, carrageenan, they are causing chronic inflammation in your gut. And you don't really feel this. It's just you get a bit of bloating, a bit of distension, your bowel movements aren't frequent or they're too frequent, and the tight junctions open up. And what happens is this. So you got alterations in the microbiota composition, which is bad. Then you've got the protective lining of the gut being washed away. Then you got increased permeability. So again, this is what happens. Bacteria translocates into systemic circulation. You can get infections from that. You got low-grade inflammation, glucose intolerance, so dysglycemia right there with a leaky gut. And you're going to eventually get to a place where you got Crohn's, IBS, big gut issues. And Dr. J also said that it took him years to figure out that they had this emulsifier, carrageenan, right, in the toothpaste, and it was inflaming his gums, and he just couldn't understand where it was coming from. But it's in all of these things here. So big food, big problem. And big pharma, well, you can see what I've been talking about there. So here's the final thing that I'll talk about when it comes to the gut. And again, on video 3, we'll talk more about it. But basically, in a nutshell, these are the most cited and beneficial bacteria like Akkermansia there. And I'll talk more about that in video 3. But you've got that low-grade inflammation, toll-like activation. You've got the kynurenine pathway open up, and that's really bad for brain health. Your amygdala's like screaming at you, you're no good, you got anxiety and depression. Then your energy comes down and you got appetite disorders, neurodegeneration, multiple sclerosis, anxiety, depression, autism, stress, addiction, and disruptions in your circadian rhythm. And also your dopamine and serotonin tank, so you don't have a lot of motivation and you just couldn't give a shit. You're just like, oh, what do I do? And your amygdala again is screaming at you and cortisol's up and you get cortisol resistance, so it doesn't even work and do what it's supposed to do. So as you can see there, anhedonia, which is depression, anxiety, avoidance, like I just couldn't be bothered. I just don't want to do it anymore. I just had enough. So what do? Pizza, booze, bad food make it all worse. Emotional dysregulation, fatigue, fear, hypervigilance. So you're always triggered emotionally and you worry a lot. So this is just a repetitive cycle that continues and persists. And the final nail in the coffin here, my friends, is like there's a lot of research. You heard Tony Robbins say, change your state, change your state. Well, here's why. But if you've got all of these metabolic issues, it's really difficult to change your state. Now, they've done a lot of brain imaging on the working brain, and they've found, and I was blown away when I saw this, and there's many other research papers like it, these findings demonstrate that the brain represents people as a sum of the mental states they experience. So if you're fighting all of this dysfunction, what hope in hell have you got to show up strong, to get the body that you want, to increase your earning potential? Because your brain's like this, you've got decreased cortical activation. So you got ums and ahs. You can't remember where you're up to. It's just like, I just can't think. Oh, I need coffee. I need sugar. No, that's the exact opposite of what you need. The amygdala is screaming at you. You got arrhythmias. So it's not very good for heart function. The great news is, though, you can actually walk that back, as I mentioned at the beginning of this. Like this is over 8 weeks, significant reductions in the size of the amygdala, number one, and number two, the hippocampus, which is working memory recall consolidation, significant increases right there, and the temporal parietal junction, which is perspective taking, empathy and compassion, which the world needs more of, number three, and really simple stuff. So that's not an issue. And video number 3, we're going to talk about these inappropriate food sensitivities and also DNA food sensitivities. So let's bring it all together. So here's what you need to do, right? Straight from the get-go. Sleep. Go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time. That's going to start setting your circadian rhythms. That's one part of setting what's called precise circadian entrainment. And the second part is light. So as I mentioned there, we've got to get enough light through the eye into the brain, and then it signals cortisol to go to healthy levels and also to trigger the release of thyroid stimulating hormone to increase your metabolism so you got more energy all day long. So that is the first thing that we need to do. Now, according to Huberman, 10 minutes when it's sunny and up to 30 minutes if it's overcast. And the light therapy, which I should have linked below, is about 30 minutes. And I use it all the time to great effect. And that's what I also tell the people that I help to grab, because in the winter, you know, you want to have your energy revved up. You want to be dropping the body fat. And that's how I think through it. It's an easy hack. And the second thing is these bloody chemicals, right? We've got to eliminate them. So I've got a PDF that you can download, and it shows you what the right ones are, so the right personal care products, all of that is. So these chemicals are deleterious. Like the Endocrine Society put out 2 warnings, crickets. Our beloved system doesn't care. They say low dose is okay. Now, these scientists say no dose is okay. Then the gut health, we know what to do with the gut health. Stop eating the foods that are causing this. Now, what's the solution for this? How do we start fixing this? Well, use what we call the hunter method. Go to your butcher and hunt for your meat, grass-fed if you can get it. And that is as simple as that. So one ingredient on your plate. What about your fruit and your veg? Go to your trusted producer and get organic if possible, and just put that on your plate. So you've got a healthy source of carbohydrates, vegetables and fruits, healthy meat, and it won't destroy your gut. So we have to start protecting the gut. And then we have to take a handle on that mental stress. Because as you've now learned, if we got a lot of stress in our body, negative emotions, it destroys our gut. So what we've talked about, the younger dudes, this is probably all you need. I've actually worked with some younger guys, and that's all they've really needed to move forward pretty powerfully. Now, if you're older dude, close to 53 like me, more than likely you're going to need all of these heavy clamps, unclamped, to open you up. And the process that we use is what we call the functional method. So if you want to book a call so we can work with you specifically to get you there fast, we look at your exposome, which is your history, your blood labs, and functional labs. Then we look at your genome. So you got foods that your DNA doesn't like. So we identify those. We take them off the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table. The next thing we do, if we have to, is look at your genome, your microbiome there, because you could have really poor gut health. And if we suspect that, based on your history and your blood labs, we'll make sure that we do a GI map for you. Then, of course, what we're also going to test for is inappropriate immune food sensitivities, and we'll speak about that as we progress. If you want to book a call, information below, you can check that one out, because what our ultimate goal is to get you away from this dysfunction there. So the amygdala screaming at you, you're a lazy loser, you're fatigued, you feel like shit, you've got decreased cortical activity, the principal hormone is old cortisol there, you got arrhythmias, you feel like shit. Over the tracks here to good blood pressure, increasing your earning potential, which your cortex is like, yeah, man, let's figure this out. Let's check this out. Let's solve this problem. And you're producing the good stuff, testosterone, DHEA, you got good heart rhythms, because who wants to live over here? You're handicapped. Basically, we're handicapped. And the longer we stay there, my friends, as you can now appreciate, basically, you get the amygdala grows larger, so it's screaming at you, fear and anxiety. Cortisol's constantly spewing out. Your hippocampus, which is your memory, comes down, so your problem solving, divergent, convergent thinking goes to shit, and you feel like garbage. So who's got time for that? So I hope you like these videos. If you want any more information about anything that I've spoken about here, drop a comment below. I'm more than happy to speak about anything. So there it is, my friends. I'll catch you on the next video.